It's interesting because we sometimes hear faculty say, hasn't society become more accepting? Why are we even talking about this anymore? And it's true that there are clear signs society has become more accepting. However, we also have national surveys of middle school, high school, college-aged students who identify as LGBTQ, who report that much more so than their non-LGBTQ counterparts, they have been verbally and physically harassed, sometimes violence perpetuated upon them. We know from other data sources that the likelihood of LGBTQ teens attempting suicide is at a much higher rate than their non-LGBTQ counterparts. And so this shows that there's still a need for creating this inclusive classroom environment.
We have to embrace our diverse population, and LGBTQIA students need to know that their stories, their narratives are present in the curriculum and in the student space at large on the university campus. If we claim to be the diversity university, we have to be inclusive of all.
It's critical for students to kind of see themselves reflected in the community, but it's also critical for students who are not members of that community because it helps to, alleviate some of those biases and assumptions that we have about members of the LGBTQIA plus community. And so the more opportunities we have to see about the community and learn about the community, the more we can kind of lessen those stereotypes and biases and assumptions.
It's important to have an inclusive learning environment because if students feel unsafe or feel worried about what might happen if they reveal their sexuality or worried about what their peers might think about them or their professors might think about them, they're just going to be in a heightened state, they're going to be stressed, and it just doesn't provide a good platform for learning. So the best learning environments are ones where students feel relaxed, they feel comfortable, they feel they can be themselves. And that's what we try to do by creating the most inclusive environment that we can.
Our world is increasingly more diverse, and so I feel like understanding inclusivity, understanding diversity is as critical as learning how to read, write, and have critical thinking skills. When I think about inclusivity and this notion of safety in a classroom, there's some really interesting research where students from the LGBTQIA plus community sometimes talk about not feeling safe in the classroom. And when students don't feel safe in the classroom, it impacts their ability to be fully engaged in class. It impacts their ability to be part of class. It impacts their ability to get, all of the full merits of kind of being in the class.
We do know that members of the LGBTQIA community receive a higher percentage of harassment, of discriminatory actions than their counterparts.
So I think a big part of it is really recognizing that there's someone who aligns with my identity, who is doing what I want to do eventually. And especially within medicine, that's super important, just to make sure that you don't really feel alone when going through something that's super hard, and recognizing that there's a plethora of faculty that really can support you, knowing that you're not necessarily the only LGBTQ person doing what you are striving to do. I think that the school definitely has a lot of faculty and just LGBTQ visibility within the curriculum as well. So I think the one thing that I remember most is in the beginning of the school year, the LGBTQ GSA ended up doing a dinner at one of the radiologists' house who identifies as LGBTQ earlier in the year, to be able to know that there were faculty who were supportive and names to be able to go to throughout my time here. And also in their curriculum, so even in doctoring and recognizing that LGBTQ issues and health concerns are definitely an aspect that we talk about and learn about, so that when we encounter that in the patient world, it ends up being much more doable, and it's not really this thing in the dark that it was like 20 years ago, and it's something that we actually care about.
I also think it's important because students in college are often exploring their sexual orientation and their gender identity, and that can create a lot of internal turmoil. And to have a place, an environment where they feel safe and supported is really important. Students are sometimes facing the decision of whether to come out and share publicly their identity or their sexual orientation. And if there's a classroom environment that's not supportive, that can have, pretty strong effects on the student's decision to come out or not. By the same token, there's that decision of how do I come out? When do I come out? To whom do I come out? Or if I'm not out, if I'm still in the closet, if I'm not feeling that sense of support in the classroom, that may keep me in the closet.
I want my students to go out there and take care of people. And it's a big wide world out there. There are lots of different types of people. And so we need doctors who are comfortable talking with, interacting with, and taking care of people. So there was a Stanford survey of medical students across the country, and they found that about 1/3 of med students who were LGBT did not come out professionally. They may have been out outside of med school, and up to 70% of transgender, non-binary medical students don't come out professionally. And one of the big reasons that was cited was lack of institutional support was a great big one. Another one was that this wasn't a piece of information that they wanted to share with their colleagues. So in my LGBTQ health talk, so I introduce gender identity, gender expression, and sex. And it's very complicated to tease all that out, and people aren't used to it, and people think they're all the same, and so you have to be very careful. So I march through, and I spend about 10 minutes on this one slide going over the differences between all these things and how it's expressed and how you might see this in a patient. And in that 10 minutes, I either purposely or maybe actually make a mistake. And I do that to show them that, okay, this is complicated, it's okay to make a mistake, and then they see how you recover from it. So giving people permission, because it's very anxiety producing. I don't want to get yelled at for making a mistake, so why not make a mistake and show them how you recover, and then you move on.
I think adding in how to do a cardiac exam on a patient who has a binder on, or how to kind of address these different issues would be really important, because that's a sizable part of our patient population and they deserve to feel safe. And if we can't address them or we feel uncomfortable in the situation, we'll make them uncomfortable.
I think it's really important to set the tone on the first day to create the space for students to feel like it is a safe and inclusive space right from the get-go. And so I also think a lot about my syllabus and the content of the class, the things that are being forefronted, the tone of the syllabus, which of course a lot of those things are much larger than issues of identity or race or class or anything. But it does create I do use it as a way to create a space that I hope is an inclusive and welcoming and safe environment.
I think it's important to set, a framework at the beginning of the semester where you set, ground rules for, respectful conversation, how you conduct, so it's okay to express particular political viewpoints that differ from other people, but that you do it in a respectful way. That's never about the personalization in terms of how, and I think that that's an important skill set that we should be teaching our students about how to, once they leave, college, how do they deal with the diversity and challenging situations in their workspace, in their careers. And I try to talk to my students as much as possible about those issues, that some of these things that we're practicing here are really relevant to your lives outside of college.
We do doctoring courses where you practice working with patients, and I think one thing that would be really important is we tend to work with cis cisgender bodies, or at least approach the patients that we're working with from a cisgender perspective.
One of the reasons I've moved away, or tried to be conscious and attempted to move away from gendered language is, language creates some structure, systems of thought, and as we move into, I think, a time and a space where gender fluidity is far more accepted and far more the norm. I definitely want to, myself personally, to support that.
Look into our ideal office, which is the Institutional Diversity, Equity, Advocacy, and Leadership Office. They offer 2 specific trainings around how to have a very inclusive classroom. The first is our Safe Zone training, which is actually a 2-part workshop. It educates folks around basic terminology and issues impacting the community. And then also there's another great workshop called Gender and Sexuality 101. So these are 2 quick and easy things that faculty might be able to participate in to really open their eyes and ensure that they have a broader focus when teaching in the classroom.
One easy thing faculty can do is to put the pronouns they go by on their communications in their courses.
Certainly there's been a lot of talk in recent years about preferred names and pronouns, and sharing my own preferred pronouns is a way to open that door. And I've also asked students, I've explored various ways, but I've sort of settled on the idea of asking students on the first day through index cards a series of questions to get to know them better. And one of those questions being, what is your preferred name? What are your preferred pronouns?
Faculty can learn more about microaggressions, which are everyday things that people say or do that might be offensive without really meaning to be. An example of a microaggression might be dividing up the classroom by men or women, or addressing people by ladies and gentlemen when some students may not necessarily identify as a man or a woman. Instead, addressing students as you all or dividing up the classroom by common interests would be a way to avoid potential microaggressions in the classroom.
I encourage students to either research individuals who are part of the LGBTQ community for the period with which we're talking about, or if we're doing our final projects, to do something in and around inclusion. And over the years, we've had a wide range of activities, but one that always sticks in my head was a group of students created a play about a world where everyone was LGBTQ and where a couple wanted to be heterosexual and how their family dealt with that couple. And it was a very quick and easy way to get those individuals who were not part of the LGBTQ community to feel and to see how heteronormativity works and to be able to counter it.
I'm thinking about courses where, that are not labeled LGBTQ politics, where I think that there are real opportunities for instructors to bring these issues into the way that they teach, even if it's through the examples in the real world that they use. So you're, a political science instructor who's teaching about Congress, why not talk about LGBTQ relevant legislation and how that factors into that setting, or even a scientist or who is looking to bring real world examples into the classroom to make the content meaningful to students. There are all kinds of opportunities to make the examples about folks with LGBTQ plus identities in ways that can both normalize and kind of like mainstream those topics so that they're not just categorized in like one part of the university, which would be my dream.